Hello and welcome to Premier Injuries once again for your Monday Data Show. Just before we get into it, remember to like, share and subscribe to Premier Injuries. Not only is it free, but you're getting a hell of a lot of good content. And for those of you interested in our leading injury analysis, make sure to check out tomorrow's injury show with Dr. Brom of Free CB Performance. It just shows you how much good stuff we've got going on here at Premier Injuries. But today, we're once again bringing you the most up-to-date injury analysis of teams in the Premier League. And we have another great discussion point from the stuff that we've been looking at this week. And what we are looking at, Ben, and you can open this out more for us, is what a lot of people refer to as preventable muscle injuries. So, Ben, can you talk us through what is meant by this phrase, preventable muscle injuries?
Yeah, are so-called avoidable injuries. Now, it's within the industry. These are the ones almost the true barometer or the true test of maybe how well a team is doing in terms of their injuries. So these are the injuries that you feel you can maybe control, to the best of your abilities. And to give you an example of if we look at the Virgin van Dijk ACL rupture, for example, with Jordan Pickford, that tackle there, external force coming in, that you can't control that, you can't legislate. Football is a contact sport. What we talk about with the ones that you can control are the soft tissue and muscular issues, and that might be issues maybe which are brought about by managing player loads, fatigue levels, all influencing factors on. If you get those right, you can minimize the risk of injury incidents and players suffering maybe muscle tears or strains.
And so how do you measure this then? What is the methodology for reporting on this? Because we're going to be talking about the teams that are doing good and bad in the Premier League, but we need to know kind of what the way is that we can measure this.
Yeah, so in terms of player management, now, long gone are the days where teams and players were all just clumped together and they're putting one big training group in. Didn't matter what kind of player you were, from a big lumbering centre back to a nippy speedy winger, or a goalkeeper, and you were just lumped in there, and that's it. You're ran into the ground. Nowadays, it's a lot more scientific. It's a lot more technical. There's a lot more, there's greater insights to be gleaned from GPS systems and managing saliva and stress hormones and general fatigue within players. And now players have tailored and individual programs. So you may have players who have, who are flagged as being an increased injury risk. So they might have a integrated training protocol where it may be 24 to 48 hours before they're involved in a full normal training session, where other players who are maybe fairly robust, don't necessarily play on the edge, are not involved in those high intensity sprints like a winger, maybe a centre forward. They are more than capable and comfortable enough to be involved in training, just to do your normal post-match recovery, and then you're thrown straight back in there. So it's, like I say, it's about looking at the individual, looking at their certain tolerances around, history and maybe what the rest of, the team are doing, and then building a program in and around that to ensure that they're maximizing their post-match recovery strategies, but then also getting those right in the build-up to upcoming games.
So we're going to put the data that we have gleaned this week up on screen, and you can talk us through this, Ben. Some of the things that I've noticed are obviously Liverpool have the most total injuries, but I was also intrigued by how relatively high Manchester City are as well, with 15 total injuries there. So kind of looking at this, can you derive and say that these teams are doing badly, or is this an unfair kind of statement to say that teams are doing bad in the current COVID situation?
What I would say first and foremost is it's just data, right? And it gives you an indication, an overview, a little bit of a flavour of what's happening. But you need to scratch beneath the surface to fully understand what's going on. And this isn't a like for like comparison. Now, you've touched upon two teams there, for example, both Liverpool and Manchester City. And both of those teams are involved in European competition. So they're both involved in the Champions League. And we look at other teams on there, So, Liverpool and Manchester City may have played X number of games, whereas we've got them on a table, say, against maybe a West Bromwich Albion, who maybe haven't played as many competitive fixtures. So it isn't like for like. And we do know that increased exposure, so the more minutes a team plays, the more games they play, the increased likelihood is that they'll pick up an injury. So that's where we tend to see those teams who are playing more minutes will inevitably have more injury. And that doesn't mean that we're talking about a team which is good, bad, unfortunate. That's just, that's what science will tell us. Medically, that's what will happen. It's just a fact of playing football.
But looking at one of the teams on there, the team with actually the most Premier League games missed, that data in the first column, Crystal Palace sit there with 88, the most Premier League games missed. Now, they don't have as many games as the likes of Man City and Liverpool. Does the data there kind of point to a bad job, or is it because of maybe the squad profile? Because Crystal Palace have a very old team.
Yeah, look, there's a number of influencing factors, and it's never going to be as easy just being able to sit down and pinpoint one specific factor is the cause of all of these issues. It's likely to be another, a number of several factors to consider. And what I would say was, and this follows on from data that we produced for The Athletic over the weekend, Liverpool, the perception is they've been the hardest hit. Well, natural fact that it is Crystal Palace, but when you contextualize that, when you again look at who it's affected and that personnel, so the numbers are high, but you can count in players like maybe Connor Wickham, long-term injury. Nathan Ferguson hasn't even played yet for Crystal Palace. He's included in that. Wayne Hennessy, goalkeeper, I think he's missed, in excess of maybe 20 games. Those three players alone probably account for maybe 40% of that overall Crystal Palace. So just from three players alone. So, the number is high, but again, you put that into context and then you look at the squad and you'd be thinking, well, how does that really impact? Well, Connor Wickham, he's down the pecking order. He's probably fourth or fifth choice. Wayne Hennessy is maybe third choice now, following the arrival of Butland behind Gaeta. Ferguson, he's never even played in that first team. And, there was some suggestion that he could have been in at that right back spot, but you've got Ward in there. And then, Roy Hodgson also brought in Nathaniel Klein. So, again, the numbers are high, but, if you directly compare that to, say, somebody like Liverpool, who, just in the centre-back area alone, lost Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip, their deputies in Henderson, Fabinho, they've all picked up injuries along the way. So I think it does need to give it a little bit of context, but it is good to look at the numbers, and there are some headline grabbers in there.
So moving on to the positive, and I'm actually looking at the two new teams in the Premier League there, West Brom and Fulham. They seem to have managed their injuries well. Are they doing a good job then? And is this uniquely impressive for promoted teams?
We tend to see that teams that come up from the Championship, particularly in that first season, inherently do overall, there are always exceptions. I think Huddersfield was one in recent times that had a fairly bad record. But if you look at maybe Wolves, I think Leicester when they first came up, it's all it's relevant. They're coming into a new league. It's maybe an opportunity for a lot of players for their first and maybe last time to play in the top flight of English football. It could be the pinnacle of their career. And I'm not saying it's always the case, but those little knocks and niggles and those ones where you may be a little bit 50-50, you're thinking, well, when will I get the opportunity again to play at Anfield and Old Trafford and Emirates or St James's Park? I will play on, and I'll play on through that injury. Maybe the older you get, the longer you've played at the highest level, maybe that motivation isn't always there. If you're going through a particularly bad run, you tend to see that teams near the bottom, do suffer or have more time loss absences than maybe those teams that are a little bit more successful, or where confidence is high and they've got that momentum, because players want to remain in the team because of competition within the squad. If they were to drop off, there's no guarantees that they'll get back into that starting 11.
So thanks, Ben, there for another great insight on this Data Monday show. I remind everybody to make sure to stay subscribed, because we've got great content all through this week, but also all through the rest of this season and going into next season as well. We'll be helping you with your FPL teams, with injury crises in your squads, but also talking all things football. So make sure to hit that bell button, have the notifications on, and I'll just hand over to Ben there to sign us out.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Another great show. Really appreciate that. We've got loads of great content coming up. I think we will be doing a game week 29 special. There are lots of question marks, always the case. Leeds, Brighton, Tottenham, 3 of those teams, a small handful involved, all picked up key injuries last weekend. So we've discussed this with Raj, but also we'll be providing greater insight and analysis as we approach that FPL deadline. So keep tuned, keep subscribing, and we'll see you all again soon.